Okay, I think we are live now. Morena, everyone,
Kia
and welcome to our live Facebook watch on our 5 top tips for applying for a quick response grant. So my name's Frances and I'm one of the funding advisors here at Foundation North.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Merle or Mary Lou, and I'm also one of the Foundation North funding advisors.
Cool. So this is our first time going live, so bear with us if we trip up or there's any technical difficulties. So we're just going to pop through our top 5, and our number 5 top tip is clarifying any costs. So these are costs relating to your project or your program. These are costs that may occur, like memberships or subs that you have for your organization. And if there's no costs, or you have a subsidy, or you have a sliding scale in place, let us know these sort of things as well, because it just shows how accessible this program or your organization is to the community that you're serving.
Yeah, Fran, scholarships, anything like that is great. Even if there's no cost to access a particular program, knowing whether there's membership costs that are applicable for someone to actually access that program is really helpful to know.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat section. And we have our lovely Gabby Harmer, who's going to be looking at and managing, looking after those today for us. Okay, so the number 4 tip relates to demographics information. So in the application form, the demographics information is divided into 2 parts. Information relating to numbers and information relating to ethnicity. With regards to numbers, it would be ideal if you could put numbers down that relate to the specific program or project that you may be applying for funding for. This is going to help us understand how many people are going to be benefiting from that funding. If you are applying to us for, let's say, operating costs, just general operating costs, feel free to provide, all the people, the number of people benefiting from all your services and programs and initiatives. That's absolutely fine. With regards to ethnicity information, if your organization provides services to a particular ethnic group or cultural group, it would be helpful for us to know how your organization does that. So if you could include in the application exactly what your organization does. For example, do you hire someone from that community to deliver or coordinate events, for example? So yeah, Fran, I find that information is quite helpful for me.
Yeah, and so what if a group, an organization, don't know their exact numbers?
Sure. So in the ethnicity section of the application form, there is a drop-down list right at the bottom of the section, and you can tell us a bit about how you gather the ethnicity information, whether it's information that you've collected or it's your best estimate. So if you only have estimated numbers, that's absolutely fine. You can include that.
Great. Cool. So our number 3 top tip is around budget, and that is providing a clear and concise budget for the program or project that you're applying for. So it's about identifying all the income that's coming through and any pending income that may be coming through, any grants that are pending, and also all the expenditure relating to the grant, to the request. And that just shows us how much of the funding overall is going towards this particular program or project.
Yeah, and we've got more information on budget documents and other documentation that you need to provide with your application form on our website. So the number 2 tip is to remember to include basic details. It's surprising how often this is sometimes missed, and this is particularly important for events. So if you are requesting funding for an event, please indicate when the event's going to be held, where it's going to be held, who, what, where, when. Those sorts of basic details are really helpful with the application.
And there is, when you are applying on our application form, there is a prompt. There is a tick box that will ask if you are having an event. And if you tick that box, it'll drop down a space where you can write the date. So that will just hopefully also prompt to just really get that information through to us. Okay, and our number one top tip is alignment to strategy. So a strong application is one that's really well aligned to one of our 4 focus areas. So our focus areas are increased equity, social inclusion, regenerative environment, and community support. And this is the key factor in our decision making. So, you know, bulk this question out and really demonstrate and evidence how your project or program is aligning to our focus areas. And we're just going to pop in a link to our focus areas so you can have get more information. And I think, Mel, there may be another watch party down the line that we really hone in on looking at our focus areas.
Yeah, possibly we may have some further sessions that will talk about focus areas a bit more in depth. Yeah.
Cool.
So those are the top 5 top tips that we have for you today around things to consider when you're applying for a quick response grant.
So those 5 again are clarifying any costs, the demographic information around numbers and ethnic groups, having a really clear and concise budget, remembering to include all the basic details, what, when, who, how, what, and alignment to one of our 4 focus areas.
Awesome. So yeah, I think we've got time. We've definitely got enough time for another tip. And this tip relates to COVID. So if there is a possibility that your event or program may be impacted by the changing COVID levels, let us know what contingency plans you have in place. It's great to know what your BAU or business as usual is, but it's also good to know if you do have any alternative plans that you can put in place if the situation changes. It is not mandatory to provide this information, but it is really helpful for us to better understand your organization. And we are finding that groups are naturally including this information with their application forms.
Cool. And again, we will link our COVID response page on our website into the chat. Now, questions. We've got a few questions here. So, how long does it take to hear back from a quick response grant?
Okay, so quick response grants have a 8-week or 2-month turnaround. So you should get a response within that time frame of us receiving your complete application. And it's really important that that application is complete. By complete, I mean that all the documentation has been provided, it meets eligibility requirements, things like that. So we've got a full application to work from. We have delivered things a little bit earlier than that time frame. It also can depend on volume as well, but that's essentially the time frame we're working to for quick response.
And I suppose it's also important to note that the application, if it is not complete, it will not get to a funding advisor until it is complete. So until it's complete, we can't start assessing it. So there may be parts or information that we may come back to you, but it will still be a complete application once it gets to us. So just also keep that in mind, because it could hold up your 8-week turnaround if it's not a complete application. So that is from complete application stage.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Fran, because we do have a team that does look after reviewing all the applications when they come through. They will check for eligibility of the documentation, things like that. So if you have submitted an application form, keep an eye out on your email inbox just to check whether any of our team may have sent the application back to you to tweak it a little bit further.
Okay, so another question from Carolyn. If you have multiple events, does the application let you add multiple dates, or do you need to add this into the project description? And I think it only lets you add one date, doesn't it, Mel? Unless you could write it on.
Yeah. It's a great question. I think technology-wise, that field will only allow one date to be entered, but there is a field where you can describe your request, and so that's where you could possibly include all the extra detail. You could talk about the start and end date of a program, how often that program is being delivered throughout the year, so you can provide a lot more information within the body of the application. And of course, you can also attach any documents as well that will support your application to the application in the documents section.
And I think the event tick box is also quite an important box for us when we're assessing, as it could be a time sensitive grant. So although it's a really important field, it is also sort of a field that helps us with assessing, just to make sure it doesn't become retrospective. So that's another reason it's in there. So, but the bulk of your information will be in the description. And so there'll be other parts of the application where you can answer that question around the events if there's multiple.
Awesome, thanks, Fran. So we've got a question from Gaurav. My apologies if I've mispronounced that. So if any project is reliant on funding from Foundation North 100%, then how do we put the income? As Fran mentioned, the budget should ideally consist of an income section and an expenditure section. So in the income section, as Fran mentioned, pop in there confirmed, any confirmed or pending. If the Foundation North application is a pending application and that is going to be the source of income, then pop Foundation North in the income section and the amount that you're applying for. I think what would be good to consider, though, is to look at the variety of other funding sources and funders out there to help support your program, because sometimes there is a bit of a sustainability issue if you're heavily reliant on one funder for a particular program. If, for example, something happens and that funder is no longer able to fund for that year, then that could seriously impact on your program delivery. So it's something to consider, to look at improving your income streams, look at a wide variety of income streams.
Good tip, Mel, another tip there.
Cool.
Okay, so accountability report. How long after we submit it do we hear about it? So is that the impact report, do we think, the accountability report?
Yeah, there could be two types of report there, a progress report or an impact report. So I guess we could speak to just both scenarios.
Yeah.
If your grant is dependent on a progress report to release another tranche of funds, then once you submit that report, our team of advisors will review it. And once it's been approved, it will go through our process to release the next installment. You just need to pop into the portal, the funding portal, and you should see the status of that report there, that it's been approved. And you should receive the payments within the next fortnightly payment cycle. If you have any questions around that, feel free to give us a call and we can give you a bit more firm idea around the timeline. If you're the report,
Mel, am I right in saying that quick response grants shouldn't really have, generally they won't have a progress report because it should be funding paid out in bulk as a one-off payment. So it's quite rare that we would be wanting a progress report for a quick response grant.
Correct. The only instances so far is if, let's say, you haven't provided some bank account details, you're new to the foundation, and we need those bank account details before we can release any funding. You could send that through. But if, let's say, we have a couple of questions, possibly we might do that. But Fran's absolutely right. An impact report is probably what will apply in the situation. So with an impact report, you just need to complete the impact report and submit it in the system, and then an advisor will review it. And that should close off that grant because the impact report is submitted at the end of your use of the grant. I think we don't really... Yeah, we don't tend to contact a group about it. However, if we do have any questions about that impact report, that accountability report, we may send it back to you via the portal with a question on there. And then if that's the case, check out your portal, keep an eye on it. If you do see something sent back and we have a question around it, just answer that question and then submit the impact report back to us. And then we can continue processing it and close off that grant. And yeah, I guess once it's closed off, you should see the status also change in the portal that report's been approved.
I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it was about the impact report. So you won't necessarily hear anything from us after the impact report is closed, but you will then be able to, in the 12-month period, reapply. What will happen if your impact report isn't submitted, it will hold up your next grant application because we haven't closed your previous grant. So that would be the hold up, which is probably when you'll hear from us.
Yeah, that's true, Fran, because we find that the impact report information relating to a past grant is really helpful when we're assessing a new application from the organization.
Cool. Question from Hayley, can we apply for a quick response grant for venue and operational staff costs? Yes.
Yes.
Generally, yes. And you can look online. We can put a link in, and it has our exclusions list. So, for instance, generally we can. It just depends on what sort of organisation you are. But we can pop in a link.
Yeah, and around operational costs, generally you're right. We can do that, but we do have also a limit on the percentage of operational costs. So if, for example, we fund up to about 30% of operating costs. Also, if your organization receives funding, government contract funding, over 80% of it, it looks like that might fall under one of our exclusions as well. So as Fran said, check out our exclusions list, the information on our website, because there are certain scenarios that may apply. There are certain maybe buildings, or let's say a facility, we may not be able to support the operating costs there. But generally, other groups, not-for-profits, charitable trusts around the sports sector, environment sector, social services, we fund operating costs.
So there's a question from Paul. Okay, it's around offering grants for organisations that have existed for over a year. I'm not 100% on that answer.
Yeah, I think possibly, Paul, what you're saying is that you've existed for more than a year, but you've only been a charitable trust for 8 months. So that is okay. If the organization has existed over a year, that means you can provide us with financial accounts. And that is one of our required documents that we need. So that's why we asked that question, and we need that particular requirement to be in place. If you are registered as a charitable trust, then that ticks that requirement, and you should be able to apply to us now. You don't have to wait for a full year of being registered with the Charitable Charities Commission.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. And if you are watching this throughout the week, you can still pop in questions and someone will be looking at those and sending them through to the funding team, and we'll be able to answer them.
Yeah, and as we've mentioned throughout this session, check out our website. We've got a heap of information, resources, useful guides there. So, you know, these are 5 top tips we talked about today, an extra tip as well around COVID. But with regards to our website, we've got information on there around other things that we'll be looking at with an application, like what kind of partnerships and collaborations do you engage with? What kind of evaluation have you undertaken for your programs? What's your financial position? So we look at a range of other things, and all this information is on our website.
And there's also, you can contact us through Facebook or on phone if you do want to talk to an advisor and just get a bit more information, where there'll be always someone on the other end of the line available.
Yeah, so hopefully today has been really helpful to all of you. Thank you very much for your time. Those are our 5 top tips and other tips. But yeah, we hope that it will help you have a bit more confidence in submitting your quick response application. And we know that it'll definitely help us better understand your organization and your request. So thanks, Fran.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks for your time, everyone.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.
Bye.